Vanessa, how are you feeling today?
So, quite okay, actually. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And as I mentioned when I came in, this place brings back so many memories, being my first office, starting off my career. So, it's a kind of double special
It's a bit of a
treat.
nostalgia kick to it.
Totally, totally. 3 years of intense, amazing work.
Nice. So, and I enjoyed our conversation that we had before we started recording about how you started off from here, how things change, and how things around us change without us even noticing or realizing. And it also ties in with what you do, Vanessa, about at the place of work. You work a lot with clients about branding and being part of a strategic veil to provide your service. Can you share a little bit more about that so that the audience can connect to that as well?
Yes, sure. So let's say per title, I go by employer brand and communication strategist,
Okay.
specifically because you always need a bit of a plan in these things.
Hmm.
So, although it's the little things that matter in the workplace, you also need a plan because the things that we're trying to solve are not simple things. So, when we talk of employer brand, we're really talking about who the organization is as an employer. So, what is their reputation as an employer? What are they known for?
Hmm.
So, the work that I do is really about kind of really articulating their difference as an employer. Why are people there? Why should people join? And this, in the long run, really helps them attract and retain not any
Hmm.
person, but the people that will thrive in that organization. Obviously, communications, particularly internal communications, is a core element to building your reputation because if your employees cannot talk about your organization, then who is?
Yeah. It's like creating what is, I think, the jargon term for it is brand ambassadors.
Totally.
So, creating that level of awareness where the people from internally are advocating for your company and for what it stands for, and which in reality it helps bringing in more clients, like business development in reality, even
100%.
talent, attracting the right people towards the
100%.
organization.
100%. The the first step is to think about that question, who do you want to be as an employer?
Hmm. It's
You
a
know,
really tough question to answer sometimes.
it is a question that requires the senior leaders of the organization to look inwards as
Hmm.
well. Before we spoke about personal development, this is not a question that is only about something out there, about a kind of imaginary vision that you want.
Hmm.
Why? Because you can say that you want to be, let's use a common, like an easy one, a kind employer.
Yeah.
But if you, as a leadership team, struggle to be kind or
Hmm.
struggle with empathy or are in a industry that doesn't allow for much of a human element but more of a kind of aggressive element, then you can't.
Hmm.
So this is why I love what I do, right? Because it's not about coming up with a nice paragraph of who we are and putting it on the career site.
Yes. Yes.
It's about working with the key individuals of that organization,
Hmm.
in articulating basically what is already there to some extent,
Hmm.
but also maybe a little aspirational,
Hmm.
kind of. I always give this example that maybe if you looked at me and I told you I'm going to run a marathon in a week, I don't know, you'd be a bit like maybe skeptical.
Okay.
But if I told you I'm going to run a 5K,
It's like,
it's doable.
yeah, yeah.
So when we articulate who the organization is, when we come up with their mission, vision, and values,
Hmm.
we're looking for that sweet spot of where they are
Hmm.
and what is achievable, because obviously it's a journey.
Yes, and this journey of self at some sort as well, because I asked this question. I'll tell you a bit of a story real quick. So, uh, think it was around a month ago. I was having a meeting with one of my clients, and this is a third generation family business. And I'm asking the person who is now the director, where do you want to take the company now? Because this is not your company; it's the company that your grandparents created, and now you inherit it through your father or parents, and now it's yours. What do you want to do with it? And where does your identity reside?
Mm,
And that and
yeah.
that becomes it's like another layer of intrigue and interest to your
Yes.
question, because now it's okay, what is it about me, and
Yes.
where do I fit
Yes.
in this?
Yes. Yes. It is really down to the behaviors, right? What behaviors is this owner able to role model?
Hmm.
Because oftentimes this is the discrepancy that we have, this romantic idea of the company that we may want to create, or quite frankly, the company culture that we need for 2025. But we don't realize that that's going to require inner work,
Yeah.
especially the work that I do most of the time is not visual work. So, yes, we can talk about the social media posts and all the employee activities that the company may choose to do aligned with
Hmm.
who they are and their differentiators. But really, the work that I do is working with that leadership team and the leaders to really engage in those behaviors they have now committed to.
Yeah.
So if we're saying our value is transparency, but we're struggling to communicate certain things to our direct reportees,
Yeah.
then my job is to support them in getting there. Obviously, everyone's going to be on a different journey. Once I had an interesting question. So I was working with, it was a kind of audit firm, so different partners, which is
Okay.
quite significant because there's a big difference between organizations that are built on partners,
Yes, yes.
as you probably know, and organizations that have a set leader with a C suite maybe reporting into them. And one of their values was change. And one of them stood up and she said, but you can't expect everyone to embrace change. You can't make us all the same
Mm.
because we're talking about behaviors. I said, okay, but if we're saying you are a community with a common purpose, and we have people in this community who are leading this community who are completely averse to change, then how does this person
Mm.
fit? It doesn't mean that everyone's a 10 out of 10, let's say,
Yeah.
with change and comfortable with change, but that a person is like with minus, then
Yes.
does that person really fit this organization? Can this person ever be a brand ambassador to this organization?
Mm.
And here I'd like to, shout out to anyone who is a leader. This is what leaders need to evaluate. You are not a leader because you have a title. You are a leader when you are promoted to a leader. You need to have that inner, let's say, energy to role model certain behaviors. You need to have that energy to suck things up. And if you feel that you are unable to do that, there's no point in putting yourself through that pain
Yep.
because it can become a very miserable place to be in.
Yep. I mean, the title is nice and fancy, yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully, the paycheck at the end of the month as well, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. And something else that I would add to that is that some of the work that I do through Endeavor is it's based the basic principle of that is teaching people how to lead themselves so that they can lead others. Uh, we take leadership for granted, at least from what I've noticed throughout my experience so far, is that you can be very, very technical in what you do, and then you end up being a manager or leader of your department. which automatically in our heads we go like, okay, I'm technical, I've done this for 10 years, so I can be a leader. No, because you've been throughout those 10 years, you've been developing your technical knowledge and not your leadership knowledge.
Yes.
So learning how to lead and how to
Mm-hmm.
manage people is a skill that you have just started to develop because now it's the opportunity,
Yes.
unless you had other previous
Yes.
experiences or previous experience even outside the place of work.
Yes, and I think here the conversation is really about this dual responsibility because an employer 100% has a responsibility to set any employee up for success, let alone the leaders. So,
Mm,
by just giving someone a title and not helping them in the skills required to perform, let's say, that role,
mhm,
is not a great idea. On the other hand, as individuals and people who aspire to be leaders, there needs to be some work as well. Okay, nowadays, I really feel, especially in the past 5 years, there's been such a concerted awareness, from coaches, psychologists. These are the people, the professional people that can help someone, in their leadership journey.
mhm.
You don't need to do it all alone. And your manager is not the person that's going to help you with that inner
Yes,
work. They will definitely help you. And if you have a manager that you kind of get along with,
yes,
and suppose
definitely.
you obviously you're, really set up for good success there, but they can never do that inner work
Yeah.
that you need to do alone.
Mhm,
And it's a pity because I see leaders in very senior positions struggling. And then what happens is when we are unaware of those struggles, because most of the time we are opposing change, not because necessarily, for example, we disagree with it, but it's triggering something in us,
yeah.
whether it's fear, whether it's, you know, and it's a pity because it means we are closing ourselves, and that has an effect on our direct reports, on their direct reports, and on the organization at large. And it's very short-minded to not develop ourselves, or employers helping people develop themselves. And we don't develop ourselves with a yoga class or someone coming in to talk to us about stress. Development takes time. But when that's done, imagine the power.
Yeah.
Imagine the individual resource. If everyone becomes, 1% more aware.
It's the atomic habits kind of
Yes,
kind of trick.
yes, because a lot of the time it's lack of awareness.
Yes.
For example, locally, with my local clients, there's always this mantra of we're so busy, we cannot do anything, we're so busy. But, I've worked in an organization where we were growing 1,000 people a month, okay? Growth of 40% per year. It was like a case study. Unfortunately, the leader, like locally, they don't have any comparison,
Yeah.
right? They've been together for a long time. They've never had a coach. So uh, obviously you're feeling overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And that's what it is, overwhelmed. We don't say it, but it's
And then we
overwhelmed.
end up, I'm feeling burnt out, for example, and use all the jargon in the world that to explain what we're feeling, and it sounds sexy as well. I'm feeling
Yes,
burnt out. It means that I've
yes,
worked a lot.
yes, yes,
It
yes.
has to mean that I worked a lot, right?
This is it. This is it, And also, leaders not maybe feeling comfortable in themselves to lean on the people that report to
Yeah.
them, the younger generations that really want to be empowered. So, there's a really ripple effect for an individual senior leader not to look inwards.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
a massive ripple effect financially for the business, but even their experience day to day at work.
And there are so many avenues through which you can look inwards and do some internal work that the resources are just there, not only virtually, but even physical, as you mentioned as well. Um, Vanessa, on a more personal note,
Mm-hmm.
because you told me that you're quite an avid um, personal growth enthusiast.
Yes, a junkie.
What do you do to
My
help
friends
yourself out?
hate me for this. Well, I think the fact that I graduated in psychology and I had started teaching singing at the age of 17.
Okay.
So I do think that theatre and the performing arts make you look at every inch of yourself because, especially, I mean, in those days, it wasn't about empowering, it was about people picking out your mistakes
Yeah.
or the things that you can do better. So my brain is constantly wired around what can you do better. Unfortunately, I take this into my clients. I do empower them, but I also it's just so
It can be tiring
automatic,
sometimes.
so
You might get a bit of
automatic.
a backlash.
Yes. So and then I studied psychology, but I was teaching alongside that. So
Okay.
there was always this side side to me. But there was an opportunity to become a teacher, but I felt that I need change. And even if I had become a therapist, I don't know, you have to meet the client where they are.
Yes.
And I am very much someone that says, you can do it if you really want it, you can
Yeah.
go for it. So I think the organizational setting
Yes. Yes.
always fit me better in my need for change and for impact. In fact, that's why I also then went into coaching, right?
Yeah.
Because as a coach, you can be much more challenging
Yeah.
to your clients, and that's why they engage you. Um, but still, that self development stemming from the arts and then into psychology. And then I did a lot of mindfulness, for example, and self compassion. It has always been there with me. And I'm a strong believer that a lot of, let's say, I wouldn't want to call it the success of my work, but a big part of my work, although I'm working at an organizational level, is very much one to one
Mm.
with the leaders. It's very much working with them to feel empowered, but also to bring it to their attention that certain behaviors need to change
Mm.
if they really want to become a more attractive employer,
Mm-hmm.
an employer that can engage and retain individuals. So, yes, I'm all in for learning. I'm always doing some course here and there. I mean, my husband's very tired of me.
You're a curious soul.
Yes, and I am mostly curious about human behavior. I really have this philosophy that if we know our machine, then we can approach life easier.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
we know what triggers us, if we know what gives us energy, we're able to respond to situations in a way that is a bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that we're free from suffering,
Definitely not.
but it allows us, like, I've had some very difficult situations in my work experiences, and I know that the way I got through them was because of all that personal development, all that therapy that I have done and
Mm-hmm.
continue to do, and the coaching that I've got. And yes, I just think it helps you when you know your car, your new car that you
Yes.
bought, right? You can drive it better and more efficiently, and I feel that as humans we're the same.
Definitely. It's a nice rabbit hole to fall into. I think it's a never ending story. It's an ongoing journey. Knowing yourself is an ongoing journey because I think if you expose yourself, at least from my experience, if you expose yourself continuously to new things, you will see a new version of you every time.
Yes.
And because of that, as a consequence of that, is that you need to readjust your structure and how you work, how you think constantly as well, because you're fine tuning every time the
Yes.
way you think and the way you behave. So you,
Yes, it's not an easy,
no, no, definitely not.
let's say, route. I have to agree with you on this one. Um, but for me, I feel it's worthwhile. I feel it's worthwhile. Even with certain decisions, I have, and again, I say this in comparison to maybe my friends, people I speak with, not only in a professional setting but also personal
Mm.
setting. that once you know yourself, it's easier to make certain decisions. It's easier to get through
Yeah.
life. The cost is that it feels like there's always something else.
Yeah.
That's the cost.
A bit of a, it might seem like a random question, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It
Mm.
ties into what we're saying.
Ah.
What is the one conversation that changed your life?
Ooh, conversation. I think multiple maybe conversations, but with one particular
Okay.
person. So my pre when I was employed at Evolution, I had a manager, and she really, I'm maybe not a conversation, per se, but the outcome of our relationship,
Yeah.
let's say, she really helped me move from being a trainer to a facilitator.
Mm.
And how, when you are delivering and facilitating a workshop, it's not about you. You are just a conduit, you are just an enabler. Your participants are the stars of the show. It's about them. You are only there to take the information from them and kind of channel it into the outcome that you both parties kind of sides have agreed on at the end of it. And I think that was transformative for me in my career, but also personally because it coincided with my coaching training,
Okay.
and I find that coaching is something that you bring into your personal life as well, where you're asking more questions, you're
Yeah.
listening more than you are talking. And I think there's a lot of parallels between the type of facilitation I'm able to do and, being a
Yes.
coach.
Yes. I think there's quite an overlap there, and I'm glad that you mentioned your view on therapy and coaching because I resonate 100% with that. I've always seen as you know, my background is psychology as
Yes,
well, and I've always
yes,
seen myself as a, "Oh, come on, you can do it, or let's find a way of how we can
yes,
do this,
yes,
rather than um, staying with the person and
yes,
meeting with the person where they are at and staying there with them."
yes.
I'm not saying it's wrong,
No,
for
there needs
sure.
to be
There needs to be a
uh,
specific someone for it.
exactly, exactly. And I think there is a place for that,
Yeah.
to really understand the person's reality.
Yes.
And even with, my clients, from a, as in a, let's say, when I say clients, I say, let's say, a leadership team,
Yes.
I am very compassionate towards their reality. Like, if these leaders have worked for 25 years in the same country, in the same company, with the same team, I cannot expect anything different from them, to not feel overwhelmed by the new generation coming up, to
Yeah.
not feel overwhelmed by the fact that finding new talent is so hard. So that the coaching bit, although the drive is definitely the more me, it also helped me be much more understanding of people's realities, and of people who maybe have not had the opportunity to be as maybe constantly developing as I
Exposed as
have
well.
had.
Mm.
Exactly, exactly,
Hmm.
or I have wanted, let's
Yes.
say, because it's a choice at the end of the day.
Definitely, it's a choice. I'm thinking constantly of my full-time employment. So, where I work at that, I have an average retention um, years for 11.4 years. So people on average stay with us 11.4 years, and that dropped because 2 years ago we employed 19 people out of 150. So you can imagine, you can do the
Yes,
math. I'm not good at
yes,
that. And so, which is very nice, and something which is creates automatically that family-like feeling in a good way,
yes.
not in the same in the way that companies say, I want to treat everyone like a family. It
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
happens because people knew each other
Yes.
and worked with each other for a long time as well. And I've had multiple conversations with our employees at different levels about loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
and the expectations that revolve around loyalty and how it affects their mental state and well-being as well at the place of work, because I've been here 35 years, so I expect this and that, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
through conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I want 30, 35 years.
Mm.
And so I
Yes.
expect this. How come a new joiner, let's say for them a new joiner,
Mm-hmm.
you've been there for 5 years, you're still a
Yes.
new joiner, is earning as much as me? And I've had these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes, as you're saying, you need to understand that um, they've been in this situation for longer than I've been existed.
Yes. Yes.
So I have no right in a way to say, listen, you're wrong
Yes.
in
Yes.
this. In their from their eyes and from their perspective, they're right,
Yes.
and there's some truth to that
Yes.
as well.
Yes. Yes. But there is also an element of when you are a leader, the you have an even more a bigger responsibility of being a relevant leader,
Mhm.
a leader of the time, which means your ideas, your beliefs, your way of leading people needs to change.
Yes. If not, succession planning needs to happen.
Yeah, if not, you need to you're gonna be very unhappy. Hey, forget
Yes.
that. Let's not focus on the repercussions of the business because they're massive, but your experience, because you're constantly going to feel like you're in a place that you don't belong,
Belong.
and that's where we have these, let's say, very shallow conversations around, oh, because the younger generation this, oh, because there's no talent, or these days everyone wants to leave a company. But take the time to understand these new realities. Take the time to understand that in the past, being a leader didn't require so many, let's say, HR matters. It just required delegating the work, conversations about the work. Nowadays,
Hmm.
there's more expected from you as a leader. It's just like that,
Yep.
But if we are surrounded by the same circle, how are we going to know this?
Yep.
And again, this is not about the company. This is about how are you owning your role? How are you owning your role? Whatever your role is.
And sometimes we associate too much our identity with the role that we have or that we need to do at the place of work. So let's say if I'm an HR manager, that becomes my whole identity,
Yeah.
and that is an identity on its own, because
Mm-hmm.
once we're at work, we need to behave like the
Mm-hmm.
job title that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not all there is to us,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we limit ourselves to that. I believe our job title becomes us.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, eh? Because in a way, it's a
Mm.
two-way story. I think we, I think there's something beautiful about someone feeling very comfortable in their role title, or let's say embodying it.
Yes.
Like we all want to go to a doctor who looks like a doctor to some extent and
Yes.
acts like a doctor. But in an organizational setting, I think we need to be very clear on the behaviors we are engaging in and the values we are, because we are representatives of the organization,
Yes.
and where we come in. And the moment that balance is off, then it's time for us to move on. So
You
I
need to have
think
the strength to move on at the same time.
100%. But
Yeah.
this is it. If we're not doing the inner work, then and we're unhappy, what are we saying we're unhappy about? Because we don't have a billiard table,
Yeah.
because the manager never listens. Like, but why are you really unhappy?
Hmm.
A lot of my conversations are like, every person, whether you are a leader, whether you just started a job, needs to understand what are you getting from the company and what are you giving.
It is a transaction at the end of the
It
day.
is a transaction. Now, um, uh, where I was, for example, working before, I knew very evidently that it was not predominantly a people first organization. Now, as I just mentioned, come from a very human background. I was a teacher, I have a lot of, let's say, love and care in me for people. And this organization was growing exponentially. So it wasn't in a place to be a people first organization, but I knew that within those limitations, I could still impact a lot. So during those 5 years, I knew exactly what the company was taking away from me or the cost versus the reward. As soon as that kind of understanding shifted,
Hmm.
it was time to move on. But we can't blame the company for our unhappiness.
Yeah, sometimes we can resentful or spiteful to the company. That's
100%. The company moves on. The company is an organism of itself. We have a choice to join an organization, we have a choice to be freelance, we have a choice to do things. Of course, every choice has limitations, every choice
yes.
comes with its own repercussions, but you're choosing to be in that organization. You can make a big difference day to day in your work
Hmm.
life just by the way you talk to people.
It's very powerful what you're saying because I would say, let's say some people, let's say not to exaggerate, saying most, some people don't recognize that they have a choice to stay or to leave. And I'm pretty sure that we are both not saying that, hey, from if you encounter an obstacle, leave immediately. That is not the core message here.
No.
But when you feel, and it's something that you feel, the time is right for me to move. The time is right.
Mm.
I, there's a certain. I cannot explain it in words, um, but I've experienced this feeling not
Yes.
at the place of work when to me it felt like mission accomplished.
Yes. Your
I did
needs shift.
I did what I had to do here. I took what I needed to take. I gave what I needed to give. Now it's time for me to embark
Yes.
on a different journey. It's that kind of feeling.
Yes.
Um, and one, it's valid. Those are very valid feelings, and we need to um, accept and recognize
Mm.
those feelings that hey, these are true. And it's okay to feel like that. You're not betraying anyone. You're not betraying the company or your superior, anyone. But if you don't act on it, upon it, you're betraying yourself first and foremost. So you need to take
Yes.
to make a decision. Should I stay? Should I leave? And why is this important for me? I think asking these very good
Fundamental
questions
questions,
that we
and
underscroll.
what can I do to make my work life better? I get leaders, and not only leaders, employees. Like, actually, I had a workshop in the beginning of the year with a whole HR team. So I think there were like 40, 50 people, a big HR team.
40.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a big company.
Okay. No,
And
no wonder.
yes, and even in an hour, I only had an hour with them. The amount of actions that we brainstormed that they could do to make their kind of culture come to life was I couldn't even count them. And here we're talking about head of level, entry level,
Yes.
every level. But we're not spending time thinking about this because we're not reflective.
Yeah.
All we're thinking about is our task list. And all we're thinking about is that narrative. Keman nashnamlu. We have so much to do.
And the
Only we
problem.
have so much to do,
Yes, yes, yes.
you know? And it's so limiting, I
Hmm.
think. It's so limiting.
And we focus too much on the problem sometimes. We all we all get caught into doing so. So I'm not saying that, hey, I never do it, but
Yeah.
sometimes we are saying, okay, am I focusing too much on the problem and not on the solution? Sometimes we need to ask that question just for the sake of asking. And the way we frame questions is very powerful. And sometimes we can have people ask that for us. Listen, can you ask me this question so that I hear it from someone
Yes.
else? It's
Yes.
funny and it's perhaps silly as well,
Yes.
but it does have a
Yes.
place.
Yes. And back to your point about retention, if we're looking at this from like two angles, from the employer side, there is an element of business benefit, of course, of having retention, but are we sure that that retention is equaling performance?
Hmm.
Because our kind of mission, or let's say our aim as an employer, should really be setting ourselves or having the structure in place to bring out the best of every individual for the, like, if they are with us for 3 months or if they're with us for 10 years.
Yes.
It's not about people staying with us. Usually, when people are staying with you for a long time, they're very familiar, they're very comfortable,
Yes.
they're unable to provide feedback that is going to bring in innovation or bring in change. So we need to be very careful with what we are seeing as a badge of honor. So that's from the kind of employer point of view. From the employee point of view, again, going to the same location for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, 35 years. Really? What does that tell us about individuals? Of course, it shows commitment. Of course, they probably would have had different roles. But then that person needs to find their inspiration from other places, whether it's a coach, whether it's self learning,
Yeah.
because we stagnate if we're in the same
If we're just having the same
place.
conversations,
Yes, with the
meeting the
same
same people, the same
people.
environment, so 1%. Um, Vanessa, I'm going to flip a little bit the script
Mm-hmm.
and addressing perhaps this question to help the young audience that follow this podcast. You managed to create or to get into a particular niche into your role, and um, I'm not sure whether that happened by accident
Mm.
or it was done from a strategic point of view. But I guess the question here is that if you have no idea where your career is heading, you just started, you just finished university, you might have a degree or master's even, but still don't know from where to start. What is your story about where you found yourself into at the
Mm.
moment
Mm-hmm.
and what you've learned throughout?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's say, I have to think about this because I know what I want to say, but it's like how to phrase it. So, as I said, I really came through with that psychology background, right? But and then what happened when I graduated in psychology is that I could not, for the life of me, be an HR administrator or a recruitment coordinator.
We have so much in common.
I mean, my personality wasn't there, and
Yeah.
there were no entry level roles, let's say, in the training space, because that potentially would have suited me
Mhm.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
And as I had said, the teaching side and the psychology side of things, I'm too much of a change slave driver to for me to have entered into
Hmm.
that. So I was looking at roles, and this marketing and PR executive role came up, and it felt like I could do these these things, applying again the psychology of, okay, how would the audience,
Mm.
like if I had to put myself in the shoes of this audience, what would I want to hear? Where would I be? What type of conversations would I have? So, and then I very much got into the communications and marketing space, um, self taught. At the time, there was no Canva, so it was all Photoshop, teaching myself much harder. But could see a lot of those transferable skills. I was never going to be a product marketeer, like crunching numbers,
Hmm.
but this kind of cause marketing, where you're really telling a story, thinking about your audience, lended itself very well. But and then with each role, it's kind of became more internal facing.
Okay.
So and then kind of doing my business psychology masters and combining the psychology and the HR with the communications and the marketing, I mean, was a perfect combination for employer branding,
Yeah.
right? Because with employer branding, you need to understand an HR function, but you really need to know how to communicate as well.
Yeah.
So it's almost like employer branding found me,
Mm.
and personal branding, because obviously that's also something that I do, found me, to
Mm.
merge all my skills. So the path wasn't clear. So to your question on, if someone doesn't know, I didn't know what the end was going to be. It wasn't like I said I want to be, I don't know, a head of marketing or a marketing manager or a head of HR. And till today, I do not fit into these areas. We were talking
Yes.
before, I'm in a very particular space, but I will always encourage someone to follow what you feel good at.
Mm.
Forget titles, forget, all of that. See what you feel good at, but constantly evaluate. So you find the job, it didn't, really work out, give it some time, seek some professional support, and then, move on when you have to. I moved on quite a bit. So I did 3 years with my first employer, and then it's like every year and a half I moved on. But the story made sense because I knew the reasons
Mm.
why I was moving. I didn't move for €5 more. The moves, like I was always addicted to what the project would be, what my
Okay.
tasks would be. And till today, I left Evolution. I could have probably retired there. And obviously, with the company growing so much, it wouldn't have been the same job at all. But I moved because I was feeling this need of combining all my communications and marketing experience with my HR experience. The role had become very talent management.
Okay.
It had become, a lot of leadership training, a lot of performance management rollouts, which I loved and enjoyed, but I was missing that creative
Yeah.
side. At the end of the day, I had done art, performing arts for years. And my speciality is that I can talk the creative talk and the marketing talk as well as the HR talk,
Yes.
right? So me not using either side of this kind of
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't feel right. So I really encourage, young people to get a coach, get a career coach. It's not spending money, it's investing in yourself. You are your biggest investment, your skills are your biggest investment. That is what's going to keep you
Mm-hmm.
always employed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to give you success over time. your s- you know your salary is not an investment, actually.
Not really.
you know
So
this is
it's the
it.
transaction. It's the result of a
the,
transaction
this
that.
is it. The bigger salary is not necessarily giving you the skills and the kind of opportunities for you to really grow and progress. It's like a false progression when we are chasing
Mm-hmm.
the next big salary. And then what happens when you actually find your thing? You may not have the skills to be able to take off with it.
It happens. I mean, it happened to me with the podcast as well.
Ah.
So there was so much learning that I had to do. That yes, you can have I can have a conversation with someone, but in order to edit, to set this up, and to do business development, reach out for guests, something that I had to learn over time. Something that's so. First of all, thank you for sharing the story. I think it's a very good message. Something that I kept thinking about as well,
Mhm.
as you were sharing your insight, is that, and this is more for the audience rather than
Mhm.
for our conversation,
Yes.
is that if you don't manage to combine every sort of like passion at the place of work, that's okay too, because the place of work, as any as well as relationships, can't give you everything.
No.
So they serve a specific purpose, and you can find and you can seek other passions, other
Yes.
other areas of you,
Yes.
outside the place of work
I
as
mean,
well.
you are an example, right, of that through the podcast. The podcast is obviously meeting a need
Yes,
of yours and developing other skills that potentially your other
yes,
work
hundred
is not
percent.
giving you. And I think this is a misconception that, like, there are a lot of messages nowadays of employers needing to be responsible for people's happiness and people's well being. And it's like, really? No. An individual is responsible for their overall well being, their overall happiness.
Yeah.
Work is responsible for providing a role and a place of work that is safe and that sets you up for success to do that role, to bring the best out of you in that role. So you know what is expected from you, you are given the right tools
Yep.
to do your work, you are recognized verbally and non verbally for the work that you do, you know where you stand through feedback. This is what work is responsible for.
And we were having this conversation about well-being before we switched on the camera and the
Yes.
mic, and we discussed about how, to be diplomatic here, ambiguous the word well-being is at the place of work, mainly because we're trying to fit, I think, everything and anything into the well-being
Yes.
context. And as we're discussing now, the place of work can provide only so much well-being in that sphere. Other areas of
Yeah.
well-being can be obtained from other areas, as you
Yes.
shared. I mean,
And what works for me doesn't work for you.
100%.
Maybe I need to go for a run and maybe you need to go to a yoga class.
Yep. That
You know?
that's what I was going to mention. I mean, some people enjoy reading a book, some people enjoy listening to music, different kind of
Exactly.
music. So,
Exactly.
and it's a self-explorative
Yes.
journey.
What causes us stress at work, and this is not me saying it, like there's actual research about this, is when we, for example, don't know what's expected of us,
Hmm.
or when our manager micromanages us. These are the stresses of work. This is what employers need to be focusing on when people don't have information about where the company is going.
Hmm.
They're not stressed because they don't have a yoga class
Hmm.
or because they can't go to a therapist. The stress around work is created by things that the employer can control,
Yes.
but you need to put, or let me not say you need to, but what is highly recommended is that all this energy that is going in to tackle well being goes into tackling helping leaders become the best leaders they can possibly be. Because once the leaders feel comfortable in their role, understand how much they need to communicate, um, uh, know how to set expectations, even if they are friends with the
Yes.
person, know how to set boundaries, know what behaviors and brand the company wants to portray, then all the other stuff is secondary. I'm not saying that you can't have your yoga class or the person coming in to talk about financial well being or the person coming in to talk about how to manage stress, but the the foundations of someone being stressed at work
Hmm.
need to be
100%.
addressed.
And that's something that I thought a lot towards the end of last year when we connected,
Yes.
and we had this conversation. I was just about, because I think when we connected in December, no, I haven't launched the new website, and one of the newest programs that we're offering at Endeavor to companies is this well-being program. But I feel that it's still a bit misunderstood, so I'm taking this opportunity to share a
Yes.
little bit about it as well. Well-being is very vast, and to provide a company with a well-being program from end to end is really tough, I would say, and slightly impossible, because as we were saying here, everyone needs something different and something tailor-made, uniquely tailor-made. So
Yes.
no matter how tailor-made your program is, as a trainer or service provider, it will not match everyone's needs.
Hmm.
But it's bringing all of this together. So usually I don't recommend a well-being program to new clients, because very similar to you, I operate in a very strategic way. So the well-being program has to fit into the overarching strategy that you're doing. So yes, we might end up doing a well-being program year in, year out, but it needs to connect or plug in, or it needs to be an add-on to your leadership development, your recruitment. If you're doing psychometric testing for your recruitment, for example, everything needs to fit in place, and everything needs to make sense. Because yes, we can have the yoga class, but okay, we have the yoga class, we go to or to a hike or do archery. I mean, we can do all of these nice things, but if this does not fit either in being part of the strategy, it doesn't make sense, or if there's no processing behind it as well.
Yes.
Because sometimes we just do the social events for the sake of doing social
Yes.
events because everyone
Yes.
does
Yes.
so.
Yes. This is it. It needs to tie in whatever the initiative is. If we take, let's say, well being, because we're talking about well being, if the company is really genuinely serious about having a well being program and having essentially a culture of well being, then what is the point of having all those activities and then not supporting leaders in empathy,
Yes.
for example, or supporting leaders in how to give recognition and give feedback? What happens in those cases is that all the effort and all the resources that would have gone into those
Hmm.
activities is short lived and wasted. So it is much better to pick something, not the latest trend, but something that you, as an organization, as a leadership team, as a leader, as an owner, believe in, and really ensure that it is multi layered. So you have your communication, your internal communication is aligned with this. Then you have your activities, then you have the work you're doing with leaders, and then you have the policies that are going to support
Yeah.
this. Because all of these things are impacting the same end user. So you cannot separate policy from communications, from employee activities, from leadership training. It's the same customer. You need to create a journey for them.
Can this be done in 3 months? That was actually a
Yes,
question that I was asked, because what you're saying is that it's very valid. I
yes,
mean, and this kind of change at this level, and I think in any company, no matter the size, it will take, I would
yes,
say, years. The bigger the company is,
yes.
the longer it takes.
Yes, and this is a very very valid point, because I get a lot of pushback sometimes from individuals, for example, saying, "Oh, employer branding is only for big companies." No, actually, smaller companies can do things much faster. Why? Because all the leaders
Yes,
can
yes.
sit in the same room.
Yep.
So instead of herding 600 leaders, like once I had to do, you herd 20 or 10, which is so doable. But
100%.
you need to know where you're going. You need to know what you want to achieve, what you want to be known for, whether it's well being or whether it's even just a culture of feedback. And you need different um, interventions for one problem. It's not straightforward.
And that is what makes it, I think, challenging. In premise, I think one of the I think causes or symptoms of this is that we're so busy building the business, scaling up the business, growing, or recruiting, or not from an HR perspective
Yeah.
only, but from a
Yes.
business management
Yes.
point of view, that we don't spend time in either seeking support, advice, and looking for a person that can ask us the right questions. And it can be not necessarily a coach, it can be a friend or an ex colleague, it can be a conversation over a cup of coffee with a friend, or someone
Yeah.
you know or worked with. Someone that we know that can ask us some questions that can help us think differently and
Yes.
disengage for a bit.
Yes. Look at something objectively, right? And
Yes.
not be in it. Yes, but this takes us back to the original point. If you don't, if you're not doing any inner work, then you have no space for this. So, and then you are looking just at your tasks,
Hmm.
just at one area. The more you do the inner work, the more perspective you are gaining. So, that inner work is not a cost, but an investment.
Hmm.
Because if you are just seeing things like this, if you're just focused on what you are calling growing the business,
Yeah.
yet you are not understanding that engaging people requires a little bit more then a party,
Yeah.
you've made you've made it harder for yourself to some extent because it's like you're not in the know. And then,
Yes.
you know, so I really, I sound like a broken record, but that inner work, getting, yes, it could be a friend 100%, but ensuring that you're doing some form of inner work. And a run is not really inner work. A run is there to help your body, for you to, think, but you need someone to talk to you, to challenge your
Yeah.
ideas. That's what I mean by the
Hmm.
inner work, you
And
know?
going from this point, people like us are most often than not caught up in hearing a lot of hardships, problems in reality, or professionally and personally. Sometimes we get caught up into this tornado of sorts. How do you take care of yourself in the midst of all of that?
Oh, so I journal.
How often?
Um, I don't put a strict
Okay,
thing.
I'm a bit strict with
Sometimes,
that.
sometimes I'm very frequent.
Okay,
Sometimes I'm not
okay,
with it. How do I take care of myself? So I journal. I do like my exercise. So I am quite active. Like I do go for walks. I have a trainer that comes once a week. So I do that. Um, I read, I practice mindfulness, but it's hard for me to say this is what I do because I
hmm,
feel after you've gone through the training of mindfulness, it's just very much part
okay. It's just
of
your day to
you.
day
So, for
thing.
example, after I meet a client and it might be a bit of an intense meeting, I kind of take a couple of breaths when I get into the car. So, I kind of detach from what was happening to me. And this is what I've learned through the time that I've been, self employed, is because I'm very sensitive to people's energies. Like a meeting would really wear me down,
Yeah.
whether it's down or up. Like I'll be super high. And
Okay, all
like,
right.
because we would come up with ideas
You're hyped up.
and I'm
Okay,
hyped up, and
all right.
I realize that both are not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I have a like a winding down
So either a
Eh,
cup of coffee to get you back up,
exactly,
or a glass of wine to
exactly,
undo that.
exactly. So the winding, ironically, in these 2 years, I think like bringing myself down from the highs has been one of the, because I get so excited, I get so involved with my clients. I don't take on hundreds of clients. Like usually I would go for the longer
Yeah.
kind of engagement. So I'm with them a lot and I get very close to them, so I get really excited that we're, doing something, or if like a leader, a particularly maybe not difficult leader, but a leader that sends me a nice message or
Okay.
reacts in a certain way, and it gives me a good
That fills you
high,
up. All right.
So, but I've learned to yes,
Calm down.
yes, to calm down because it takes energy as well being on a high. So I definitely do take a lot of precautions to take care of myself. And most recently this year, I've really been strict with not taking too much in my day.
Hmm.
That in my day I do have time for exercise, for reading, for journaling. I hate the hustle feel. Like I hate being on the receiving end. So I
Okay.
would never want to be the one being
Causing
a
it.
no.
Okay.
And I don't want to be in it. Like I don't take pride in that hustle at all. I want to curate things. I want to, if my clients call me, I'm not like out of breath or I can't speak to them. I don't want that kind of,
Okay.
lifestyle on a personal level, like, or for the people that I work with, be it partners or, it's like if I came here today and this was like extra, or,
You're
it's
okay
like,
with it.
no, if it's like felt that was just another thing on my thing, let's get it
Ah, okay,
done.
okay, okay.
Like I don't want it, to
You don't want it to
to
be
be like
forced.
that. Exactly.
Okay.
I want to enjoy the things that I do, or else I can go and be employed.
Fair. Very, very mindful of you.
Yes, I'm very mindful of what being freelance gives you and takes from you.
Yes,
Let's
yes,
put
yes,
it that
yes.
way.
Um, Actually, you reminded me of someone that a friend of mine told me, and he's also a very avid practitioner of mindfulness.
Hmm.
He told me that the harder and longer you work, the longer you need to rest.
Yes, and I've really experienced that. It's like my downtime really needs to be downtime because,
Yes,
and then when I'm on, or when I'm delivering, for example, a workshop, I am so in it. And this really shocked me because at Evolution, I was working 15-hour days,
yes,
like easy.
yes,
In my first year, I worked every weekend. Again, my choice. I knew what I was getting and I was giving. So in my mind, working long hours or having a big workload is, I've always had that. But going self employed
yes,
shifted that completely. And I really had to shift my mind, and I'm still learning, 3 years later, that it's not time in time, but time and energy.
yes, 100%. Um, the way I sort of like explain it, or it's in my head, is that when you're employed, and no shame to that, I'm employed as well, your target is fixed.
And
You're
your
there,
boundaries are
and your
fixed as
boundaries is
well
fixed.
with time. Yeah.
Employment on this front is easy at any level,
Yes. Yes. It
in the sense,
provides a framework.
yes, there's about the
That's the
fixed
thing.
boundary,
There's a framework.
and so things are simple. You don't need to worry about anything. Um, you don't need to chase clients to pay you for your services. You don't need to issue an invoice. You just do your work, and by the end of the month, you receive the paycheck.
Yes. Yes.
Hopefully, you do your work well, so you don't there are any performance related repercussions. So, and, but when you're self-employed, you need to take care of everything and anything, and that, I think, that constant thinking, because you have to, otherwise you
Yes.
can't do it,
Yes.
tires you down as well.
100%. And what I think I found the most, um, let's say, challenging wasn't even maybe time or the lack of framework, because, again, my roles in the past were quite dynamic, especially the last one I had before going employed. But representing yourself, like the energy and the sense of responsibility of representing yourself and being paid directly and being selected directly for you really weighed on me, and again, I was always responsible, I always
Yes,
delivered,
yes.
but that is different.
Next level.
It is really a
It
next
is.
level if you care,
Yes, yes, yes.
if you
Because
care.
you're selected based on who you are and what you bring, not who you are in the sense
Yes, but to
what you
some
bring to the
extent,
table,
who you are as well,
what you
because
represent.
they could be, many people do more or less the same thing. Okay, mine is a little bit niche and I have this maybe particular background, but the truth is that you can go to other people.
Yes.
So the fact that someone selects you comes with such, I find, such a responsibility,
Yes.
and you need to be someone that's able to handle that. You see, we have this idea that freelance is just about setting your own schedule. It's not, or getting paid directly. It's not. It's about really being able to make a lot of decisions alone without anyone to turn to and say, how do you think I should do this?
Yeah.
And also the weight you carry when you're advising. Um, uh, Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, when you're working with, very seasoned leaders who maybe have certain beliefs, and then you are going in and potentially showing a different way, it's really hard. It's really hard,
Hmm.
because you are playing with someone's life here, or when you are coming up with an employer brand kind of position. It's not just about like putting a sentence together of how fun it is to work here and stuff, it is a massive sense of responsibility because you are taking like something that exists and you're putting words
Hmm.
to it, and again, if you and then go into that hustle mentality, how are you able to really deliver with integrity, with authenticity, with the energy that that client deserves?
Yes. And on the large scale of things, you're bringing a whole company into your narrative and your storyline. So if you say, hey, we're doing this branding exercise, or in my case, hey, let's doing this training program, and Q1 will do this, Q2 will do this, Q3, and so on and so forth. It's an entire year of your story
Yes,
and the story that you sort of invented for, and with the help, with the aim to
yeah,
support the client. But ultimately,
yes,
you are the author of that
yes.
story.
You are definitely the author of that experience that you
Yeah.
are giving them and value that you are giving them. And you cannot take that lightly. This is not about like being, I don't know, I'm just inventing a term like a marketing executive and then being a marketing consultant. Like it doesn't work like that. There are multiple layers and responsibility and the way you say certain things and so that come into this. It's not
Hmm.
taking the work you do as an employed person out into doing it as a freelance.
Yeah.
Again, there are different types of freelancers, but when you are in the work, and I always say this, I'm not in the work only of building employer brands, I'm in the work of changing and transforming organizations. When you're in that work, it comes with a lot of sense of responsibility, I find, and each conversation that I have with my clients is a weighted one, because I know they respect me, they respect the work I do, and I want to do them well,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And that's tiring. The good type of tiring,
Yes,
but it
yes. It's
does
rewarding, I would say, but it's
100%,
also tiring.
100%. And um, I think that is because I also find myself needing to rest more these days, because the conversations that I'm in, or the situations where I'm in to support clients, the stakes are even higher. So they are getting higher and higher and higher. So you leave the room, say, okay, did I say the right thing? Was this the right advice? Is this the best that I can provide? How can I do better? What else do they? So you're trying to immerse yourself into the business, immerse yourself into the problem, and then provide a solution for. So you're wearing multiple hats at one go, and
Yes,
very rewarding when you see
yes,
the fruits of it. But
yes,
it's like growing a
yes,
plant, right?
yes.
After
While being very respectful to their reality
yes,
at the end
yes,
of the day. And you can never know their full reality because you are not an
mm-hmm,
employee of that organization,
mm-hmm,
So there are so many elements that come into this, And definitely I'm very grateful that my last employment prepared me well,
okay,
because I was in a position of, training 600 leaders and putting out, activities, let's say, that were new. So, let's put it this way, I got a lot of good stakeholder management
okay,
opportunities.
yeah,
But as I said, the representing yourself is something I hadn't maybe, or the weight that comes with representing yourself I hadn't calculated for. And I feel the technical side is very easy for me. It comes very natural.
yes,
I don't stress about that. But and then the responsibility of giving the client what they expected and guiding them in a way that is sensitive to their reality, I think
mm-hmm.
for me is very important.
And it's something that you have to experience on your own, and something that you internalize on your own sometimes as well.
Yes.
What I'm reflecting on, Vanessa, as we're speaking, is that on your question that you asked me right at the very beginning today,
Mm-hmm.
before we even started the
Mm-hmm.
shoot, is you asked me about who my audience is.
Yes.
And I think from our conversation, we had a practical idea of who the audience is because we've been discussing about right now solopreneurship. We discussed about youngsters finding their own career. With this conversation related to business owners, HR professionals, or leaders who are in a shape or form um, decision makers or need to take care of their employees. So the audience is quite varied, I would say, because there's a message for everyone in occupying different roles. I would say so. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing your experience.
Welcome. Hopefully, someone, takes something
I'm pretty
from
sure.
this.
there, I'm pretty sure of that. But before we leave, we have a tradition. So I will ask you to choose
Oh,
one
wow.
of these, read it out loud, and answer the question.
Can I get up?
Yes, for sure, for sure.
What's one book that significantly impacted your personal growth?
Are you an avid reader, first off? Okay,
Yes.
that's
I
good.
mean, not all the time,
Yeah,
but
okay, all right.
I do read. Let's say one book that stuck with me was the book of Bob Iger, who is the CEO of Walt Disney. I loved that book. This man stuck in being the number two and the number three. First of all, he started from he was like an unskilled person on a set.
Okay,
Okay, and he built his way up to CEO, which is impressive. Of what company? But he endured so many challenges of not being given the opportunity to rise up to CEO for such a long time. And it really impressed me, because maybe because I'm that person who would have, not stuck it out.
okay.
Um, but it really impressed me to see how he really stuck with it for years. I mean, we're not talking, 2 years, 3 years, like a long time. And then he was finally, like rewarded because he became CEO. And a few years ago, he left and he was asked to come on again,
Okay. So
talking
was that
about
impactful?
legacy and
Is
stuff.
it an autobiography or is
Yes,
okay?
yes, yes. Something the train ride or something like this, because obviously Disney and all the Disney parks.
Yes,
I
yes.
would highly recommend it. It really struck me. And then there was another one about the first woman fighter jet pilot,
Okay.
American.
Was there
I
a
forgot
movie
her
on
name.
this or?
I'm not sure.
Well, uh-huh.
And it really impressed me. I mean, what she went through in all her career, because and then she ran for politics as well. And it really just reminds us that people who are, let's say, in the what we call successful, you know, work very hard to be there, and it comes at a cost.
What we see is just it's truly the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, yes,
There is a lot going on behind the scenes. I mean, we were having this conversation
yes,
before as well, um, because mainly because of confidentiality as well, and for ethical reasons. Sometimes people in our fields, even though they differ as well, we can't share everything as well, just to protect or protect the client or the
yes,
organization. So
yes,
there is a lot of work that goes unnoticed and has to go unnoticed just because the design of the work that
yes,
we do.
yes, 100%. I mean, if I had to post every, I don't know, intimate conversation that I've had or,
Yeah,
workshop, that's a safe space, and it's not, it's to be kept in that
like that.
safe space, you know. And as I said, we make choices in our life to be the type of people that we want to be, and everyone is can make their own
Judgment.
choice. But I would never use my clients or the intimate moments with my clients as a way of getting new clients,
Yeah,
kind of thing, you know.
can be done. Uh, in a way, because I'm thinking about the organic growth that we discussed
Hmm.
before as well, and I'm connecting it with the train ride with the
Hmm.
book that you've just mentioned as well.
Yes.
Organic growth is like that, having a referral or having a client refer your service or you as a person. is a long term thing because a project might span months or
Yes.
years, and then by the end of it, the client would feel comfortable in recommending you. So having a recommendation is very
Yes.
meaningful
Yes.
and doesn't happen
Yes.
like this.
And again, I think it's a choice. Like these two books that I spoke about, their careers were definitely a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
So that's why every day we have to reflect on what our needs are, what we enjoy. It's not that every day is going to be a great day, but if at a point you have less good days
Hmm.
than good days, then that's a point where you need to really reflect whether something needs to change, and
Hmm.
it's not a company or a person that's going to make it better. Like you need to find that in a, let's say, in a motivation to make that change, to understand why and what that change might be,
Hmm.
but we can't put it on others to make that
Choice for us or decision
choice.
for us.
Exactly.
We play a role in
Exactly.
that.
For sure.
Vanessa, thank you
Thank you for
for being
having
here.
me.
You're welcome. Hope you enjoyed the conversation.
I did. I
Uh,
didn't know where it was going to go, but
that's the
glad it
thrill of
went.
it. That's what
Yeah.
I enjoy the most out of it because I allow myself to ask any question that
As
comes to
there
my
that comes to
mind,
your mind.
and I think that gives it a bit of a twist as well.
Yes.
So once again, thank you for being here and for sharing this experience with me.
Thank you.